All right, Jake, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on. We are rolling. We are live. Are you ready to get grilled?
Get grilled? I don't have my grill yet.
All right. Are you ready for the first hard hitter? So what's your favorite color?
Oh my god.
Oh my God.
Every time I hear that question, I always
Yeah.
think of Buddy the Elf from Elf.
Oh,
Like, yeah,
yeah.
what's my favorite color?
Oh, no, it's just like I noticed like some other podcasts because I've gotten enough people on to where like other people that I have interviewed, I have found out that they were on another podcast. So like I'll go check out that other podcast. It's usually just questions like that are kind of generic. It's like, so what's your biggest inspiration? What's your favorite movie? And I'm just like, why don't you just ask what their favorite color is and then skip to the punch? Like you're not doing anything. I hate to break it to you.
I mean, it's just a softball question.
I know. It's just like, did you even look at their work,
Everybody's
skim
answer's
through
gonna
it a
be the
little
same.
bit, or?
It's gonna be something in the. It's probably gonna be one of the main colors on the RGB spectrum. It's gonna be red, green, or blue.
Right, yeah. If you're really, really, nuanced and avant-garde, you might even say like aqua or maroon,
Okay, the color in this room is not a coral. I have been yelled at by my mother and by my girlfriend several times. It is not coral.
It is not coral. They made a
is not
specific
coral.
point to say that it's not coral.
Even Lowe's says it's not coral, and I keep
I like that they
forgetting what the
described
name
it
of
by
is.
something that it's not instead of what it is.
It's not salmon. I've been repeatedly told it's not salmon.
Yeah, that's not salmon. It's more like someone tried to do brown, but they thinned it out too much,
That and also the exposure in this room is a bit dulled down because there's decent cloud coverage outside.
Mm-hmm.
But when there's proper light in here, it looks more like a lighter and rustic orange, which I
Oh, okay.
particularly enjoy.
Okay. So it's just lighting then that's basically saying,
Yeah,
kind of giving it what make it
that's
what
the
it
thing
is.
about painting, and that's the one thing that a lot of people don't understand is paint will always change color no matter what sort of light you're in. If you're going like for a DP standpoint, if you're going more towards the tungsten, the orange side, blue is going to turn more green and maybe a little bit more on the orange side.
Mm-hmm.
Or if your room is straight yellow and you're going towards like 5,000 Kelvin or a little bit beyond, because that's when it starts turning blue, it'll start looking more like a pukish looking white.
Right. Well, it's also not just the light that's being cast. It's the surface that light is specifically
Mm-hmm.
being transmitted through, and the density of
Yep.
the atmosphere of the room, or where the environment that you're in, and then what surface is reflecting that light, which will affect the scene. So there's like 5 or 6 different variables when it comes to lighting something.
And then there's also the way that the finishing is done on the paint too, because there can be matte, which all of these
Or
walls are.
gloss. Yeah.
Then there's satin, there's gloss, and then there's also eggshell too. But
There's
I'm not going
that's
to
an
get into that.
eggshell. That's very specific.
It's the very specific tint of color that like the stereotypical eggshell looks like.
I see. Okay. So as a finish?
Yes,
Okay. I will have to look
it's
into
also a
that.
color too, but I could also be very wrong. I'm not a painter. I'm a cinematographer.
I mean, that's fair enough. All right, Jake. Well, it's nice to meet you. Why don't you just go ahead and introduce the audience to yourself? Tell me a little bit about the work that you've done, because you've been doing cinematography roughly for about 7, 8 years, if I recall.
Closer to 10.
Closer to 10. Okay. All right.
Yeah, my IMDb was created like 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, gotcha. I see. All right. Well, just go ahead and IMDb. See, it just sounds professional though if you just say my IMDb. Even though anyone can
My
make one, it
internet
just sounds way
movie
better.
babies. Well, anyway, I'm Jake Reynolds. I'm a cinematographer based in the Cincinnati, Kentucky tri-state area. I have been shooting movies, both shorts and feature lengths, for the past 10 odd something years. And yes, I'm still coming to grips that a third of my life has been in the movie business.
Mm.
And right now, I actually just finished up a project called Sundays with Dad, and it's now currently on Reveal. And I have a couple more projects lined up for the upcoming year, which I'm very happy for. And they hopefully will not be the emotionally draining kind that I have been a part of for the last couple of years, not in the bad way, but the ones that will make the audience feel a very certain way that they feel in the horror genre.
Okay. Is that what you typically enjoy doing the most? Is the horror genre?
That is what I started out with in the horror genre, but more recently I've been starting to branch out because storytelling in the horror space is very much set in stone, cut and dry. And my aspect of cinematography is to make the audience feel as if they are a part of the scene. With horror, that turns it more into a psychological thriller, which
Okay.
I very much am akin to that because I like messing with people's heads.
Right, right.
It's very fun to do that, especially from a DP aspect, because what I do on set should not be noticed. Because if the cinematography is noticed in a movie over the actors, then there's going to be an issue.
Do you think horror has gone too artsy in the recent years when it comes to the cinematography?
I really couldn't tell you that. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. I haven't watched many horror movies in general. I have made one in recent years called The Demons Within, which is very much a love song to a show on Netflix that is called Midnight Mass. The director told me to watch that show through and through, and I still have nightmares about it to this day. And I wanted to replicate as much as I could of that show, and I believe that The Demons Within gets pretty damn close to it.
Okay. What was that? What was Midnight Mass about? I haven't seen that.
It's about a small island community that all is a part of a local church, and the local church's priest died, but he did not die at all. Spoilers. Anybody who's watching, you're going to need to skip this part. So the priest dies, but a younger priest that looks eerily similar to him in his younger age comes to the island as the interim priest. And ever since he arrives, miracles start happening.
Okay.
And it all stems from this angel that he discovered on his trip, his religious trip. But it wasn't an angel, it was a vampire.
All right. Interesting.
Well, the even more interesting thing is the community and the priest himself is so blinded by their own religion and their own faith, they do not see it as a vampire, they see it as an angel.
I see. Wait, this I don't think I've seen this, but I think there's a particular scene that sticks out in my head that I think I know actually what you're talking about. There's this scene where the character, the angel / demon or whatever, is walking down the center of the aisle, and it's lit very much like a candlelight ceremony, almost ritualistic in that manner. And it has like teeth and just a very, very odd complexion. It's not like the pasty typical vampire thing.
It's a very grayscale complexion. Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like a zombie in a way, a very looming zombie. Okay, so all right, so that scene. All right, I don't know why I remembered that, but when you started describing that, it sounded familiar.
And then when the angel gets up to the altar, the wings spread out.
Yes, that is the same one.
It's more of a bat wing than it is an angel feathered wing that we typically associate with angels.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, the Demon Within, the thing that you referenced, Midnight Mass from, that was recent. That was 2020. That was 2023, correct?
2023, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Is that the most recent feature that you've done?
No, the other most recent feature that I've done is called Without Her, and it's a complete change from the Demons Within. Whereas the Demons Within is a psychological horror
Okay.
that's disguised, or a psychological thriller that's disguised as a horror. Without Her is a domestic violence movie.
Is that the one with Beth McCalf?
Yes.
Locally? Oh yeah, I had her on. Yeah, and she actually vaguely, she briefly went into the her role into it as the person who was getting abused in the domestic violence.
Yeah, it's very vaguely based off of the director's real story,
Okay.
and it means something when you get to recreate that story and then to have everybody else see that story be told,
Okay.
because it's not necessarily a movie, it is a movement, because it's something that brings awareness to something that not a lot of people get to be heard about,
Mm-hmm.
especially with their dogs too, because Jessica Griesheimer would be able to, the director and the writer of the movie, she would be able to bring out a lot more to this story, but most domestic violence stories don't get to be told, and even less stories get to be told because there's a pet involved, specifically a dog.
Well, specifically, it's like because in the trailer, it's the dog narrating
Mm-hmm.
the character. The dog's a character in it, which I wasn't aware of when Beth was describing it to me.
Yep.
And it's telling. Does the whole film tell the story from the perspective of the dog through the
Yes.
dog's eyes? Okay.
Yep. Storm is Jess's dog,
Okay.
and he was such a good boy. And it was all voiced by a local talent to Chillicothe, Jace, and the way that it was described made it feel so human,
Mm-hmm.
so human, and also so innocent. Because we never really consider another perspective in those stories, especially from man's best friend.
Right, right. Because I mean, it's like if Air Bud was in an emotional movie, but he didn't have any talent in sports. It's like a from the total of a emotional support animal or something like that.
Yep.
But you originally were going into college for construction management. Is that right?
Yeah, this is correct.
Well, funny enough, I'm someone who is still in construction at the moment. So when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I got to ask him about that. Did you ever end up getting into a project manager position, or was it something that you just kind of tried to transition right out of college into do something else? Tell me about the transition and like, how you actually went from going to college for that and then, pursuing cinematography more full time.
Here's the story. In high school, I was in my uncle's roofing business, putting on shingle roofs, tar, metal roof, and doing downspouts and gutter jobs, while also doing general cleaning of those gigs as well. And when I was first starting to go to college and started looking at the different universities, the most logical major for me to continue that role was construction management at NKU. And it was at that point that I was a freshman just coming straight out of high school. I didn't know anything else in the world other than what I already knew just going into it. And there was an epiphany that I had in the middle of the night when I was sleeping in my dorm room that I don't want to be a roofer for the rest of my life. Because it was maybe a day or two beforehand that my uncle just had his skin cancer that was around right here completely removed. And mind you, he was and still is the manager and owner of that business after my grandpa gave it to him. That is the story that I have been told. But
Legend goes.
allegedly, yeah. The legend has it. And I really didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, knowing that I could I could die knowing that it's something that could have been managed.
Right.
And I wanted to do something that was completely away from that that workspace. And I remember that in high school I was more into graphic design and creating things out of nothing, that I decided to change my major uh, a few weeks into my freshman year into film.
Okay. Oh, so you switched
And
halfway through. Okay, so you
yep,
didn't graduate with that and then decide to do something different. You just
no,
okay.
I have a film degree, which
How prestigious.
about as
From
prestigious as
NK
fine
from Northern
arts.
Kentucky University.
Yep.
That's a big university. I've been there on a number of occasions because back in the day, I actually used to go swing dancing, and they have or did, I don't know if they still do. They had a very active swing dancing group that was there, and
Really?
sometimes we would interact with. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was NKU. Yeah, that was my exposure to NKU. But when I first showed up there for like one of their events, it was a massive campus. I'd never seen anything like that. It's like it was comparable to what is it, UC? Yeah.
Okay. I never thought NKU would be compared to UC in terms of
Okay, well,
expansion in space.
UC is obviously way bigger, and they have a lot more buildings and whatnot. But it wasn't like it wasn't a community college. It was
No.
like a very large college, and so that was. So you graduate college with a film degree because you realize you'd rather be a starving artist than end up on a roof or managing people on a roof, which I can relate
Yes.
to. How did you first plug yourself into the local indie scene? And, what were you most pleasantly surprised by once you got into it?
Oh, that's a really good question. It actually started with
I'm
my
going to grill
first.
you, buddy. I told you.
I believe it started with my first ever 48-hour film project. The the director, I have no idea how I even uh, became acquaintances with him. We just started working together during that 48-hour film project. I was a camera operator at that time. He had two or three other cam offs on that on that project, and I think at that time I started uh, building my own set of filmmaking tools. Like I had a dual mounted shoulder rig that you saw in Film Riots, made out of
Oh, okay.
PVC and the
Oh, the
covers.
Film Riot. Film Riot loved their DIY equipment. They loved it back in the day. It was those were feats of engineering. I will defend that.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And when I saw that dual mounted shoulder rig, I'm like, oh my god, I gotta make this.
Film Riot could MacGyver literally any type of equipment. That's what I learned.
I know, right? It's great.
You know what? We can turn anything into with some screws and some glue and PVC. I'm like, wow, I guess you really can. You did it. You show the video.
I'm pretty sure my little brother still has that shoulder rig in his house somewhere, just
It's
gathering
just in a
dust.
glass case on a red velvet pillow.
This belongs in a museum.
It's probably going
And
to be
then,
like an
and then
ancient
after
artifact
that,
at some point.
I just started to get into into the different Facebook pages like SOFA, MOFA,
Mm.
Ohio Film, and just started to get connected because with what we do in the industry, networking is everything. And
Yeah, it is.
I've come to realize that networking is more important than your degree.
Oh, yeah. Facts.
Even though the degree did help me find everybody that I needed to find quicker, where if I had not gone to NKU for their film school, I don't think I would be where I am today. I'm pretty sure I would have found just another business to go into for general contracting, and then I would not be here on a podcast on a Sunday afternoon talking about how awesome it is that I get to create for a living.
Yeah. So, you found that college was actually useful for networking? Sometimes, because sometimes, like, you go to college with a lot of different people, and they all have hopes and dreams, and some of them are kind of you have to figure out which one are the dreamers and which ones are the doers, and who you want to associate with. And obviously, you want to be associated with the doers, who are actually not just going to sit around and just kind of talk about making films. They're the ones that are actually going to go and do it. And it's nice to hear, because that doesn't always work out that way from people that I've talked to. Not everybody, they go into film school thinking like, oh, I'm going to make so many connections, and then oftentimes they actually don't really make any connections, because they're in with other people who don't have any other connections. But the fact that it worked out for you, I wouldn't say it's an anomaly, but it's certainly, this is the first time I've actually heard of it anecdotally. I'm sure it works for a lot of other people, but the fact that it worked out for you is fairly uncommon, I would feel like.
I didn't know that it was uncommon.
It's just my hypothetical observation, just based on people that I've talked to, and a lot of other things. But yeah, so you do the 48, you get involved with that. At what point did work start kicking off a little bit more? How many years did it take of making short films to get to your first feature?
My first feature was like maybe a year or two after that project.
Oh, really? How did that go as your first feature? Because some first features are,
as
first features.
Everyone who was on that project, we all can agree that it was definitely a learning experience.
I feel like you're being probably very polite.
Even the director was like, it was definitely a learning experience, because we got crowdfunding for it. I got off of my own dime, I got a better camera, and off of the crowdfunding, I was able to get a wide-angle lens that I still use today, and a telephoto lens that I still use today. And it was definitely something that helped me prepare for the future, because in that role, as my first DP role in a feature film, you got to have a sound guy right next to you operating the sound, because my equipment just had my regular ass shotgun mic just plugged into the camera.
Which, mounted on it?
Best idea ever. And then it also happened that if you have the ability to have somebody that can pull focus for you, do it.
I've seen, focus pullers are probably the most underrated role in the camera department. They are masters.
On my A rig, I still have a focus wheel.
Oh, look at that beauty.
It's nothing.
It's nothing, but like, it looks good though. That's it might be empty. There might be nothing in it, but it looks good.
This is more my run and gun setup, because it still has the Sigma 18-35 on it.
Okay.
And usually I have my wireless HDMI hooked up right here where the NPF to V mount adapter is.
Yeah.
Just so I can give a video village to any short production or feature length that I'm on. Basically, it's made to be extremely light, so I can move it around as I need to.
Is that your go-to rig normally?
With how this camera is set up right now, it's set up more for run and gun, but the camera itself is what I mainly rely on.
Okay, gotcha. How many cameras did you have before that? Like, what generation is this for you?
Let's see here. I started out with Nikon, which is the best idea ever to go with a photography brand before a video brand. I started out with a D3200, which helped me out in the long run because it made my footage look different. And that's the thing that,
different in what way?
Helped me realize that I needed to stand out was when I was in film school, everybody went, you got to have Canon or you got to have the Fuji camcorders. Is guess what? That dual pixel AF that Canon still has.
Yeah.
That's the best autofocusing setup that you can have next to Sony's.
Okay.
But me personally, I wasn't worried about autofocus because I've always been sharp with manual focus. What I've always been worried about is the image quality. And if you have a good quality image, you will get noticed far better off than, oh my God, the autofocus is so good.
Right.
And that's why I went with Nikon, because their color science, before you go into any profile and make it a flatter image or make it a log image, their color science is based off of their photography side. And their photography side is as lifelike as you could get. And this was back in the day, like 10 or 12 years ago. And then I just kept on moving on in the Nikon lineup. I started out with a 3200, then I got a 7100 because I needed a better sensor, and I also wanted dual SD card slots whenever I do my photography gigs.
Okay.
And then I moved on from the D7100 to the D500, which now my girlfriend has. And I went to the D500 because, one, it's still the same lens mount that the 7100 and the 3200 have. The difference is I can control the aperture in camera, because the last two cameras, the 32 and the 7100, they both don't have motors that can control the aperture in the lens. Canon and much of the other brands had electronic aperture control with the motors inside the lenses. Nikon didn't.
I see. Okay.
Which is why the D500 was such a paradigm shift for me, because I could now finally control the aperture without having to switch modes between photo and video mode and figure out what exposure was.
Is there a camera that you're looking at potentially moving into and moving away from this one, or are you pretty set with what you have for the types of filmmaking that you're in?
The Z-Cam isn't my first cinema camera. My first real cinema camera, it was the Blackmagic Micro Cinema, the cult classic.
Yeah,
I still
remember
have
that.
mine today.
It's
And
a
I
good
still use
camera.
mine.
Those
I still use
Blackmagics? Oh, for what types of projects do you use that for? Because it's not like your main camera.
My first couple of shorts that I used it for, that's what it was used for. Neves, which was my Winter Film project that I was nominated for Best Cinematography, that was used for the Micro Cinema. Let's see here. Sundays with Dad was actually shot on the Micro Cinema.
Yeah. I actually saw Sundays with Dad. I got a I don't think it's out yet, but I did get a screener. Is it? I don't know. My timelines are getting messed up because
It is currently on Reveal.
It's currently on Reveal. What do you mean by that?
As in reveal.net. You just need to create your own account through Google or Facebook if you want to, and you can watch it for public viewing.
I forget which podcast. It was either for Tom Angeletti's podcast or Timothy Cox's podcast. I saw both after and Sundays with Dad. Sundays with Dad.
I also shot after.
You also shot after, yeah. I saw that, and I'm like, oh shoot! I didn't even know that. Like because I saw that, and then I was going through your IMDb, and I'm like, oh shoot, it's this guy. It's this guy. This is the guy that shot it. It's a small world, but okay. Well, that's.
But
yeah, I saw Sundays.
To continue with my camera story, I tried selling my Micro Cinema because I was trying to get the Z-Cam for the Demons Within.
Okay.
Because the producers wanted a 4K camera, and well, the Blackmagic OG is not that.
Okay.
I couldn't muster up the courage to actually sell it because that sensor is so special.
And it has particular uses where it's just king for.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And for Sundays with Dad, the director, Tom Angeletti, he requested the use of the Micro Cinema because he wanted to shoot it with it, because I don't think he's ever used one before. And there's a very particular way that sensor records light that it's very close to how Ari's sensors do.
Okay. And what did that do for Sundays with Dad specifically in terms of its application that he wanted to go for?
I think he wanted more of a classic image, which is exactly what that sensor could give, which is the grain from the ISO of the sensor is more organic, very more filmic than most of the modern sensors that we have in cameras now, which most cameras now use Sony sensors because they're just easier to use. Whereas the Blackmagic OG, its sensor is from Fairchild, which is more on like the medical side of things. But they also make consumer grade sensors.
Okay.
But the way they do their technical stuff is it's very much representative of ARRI, where they take two different exposed high bit rate images and then combine them for recording. And that's how you get the image that's very high fidelity, and it also gives that very much of a special filmic look.
Okay.
I really don't want to get too technical in it because a lot of times when I do tech speak, I get.
Well, I can tell you like it. You're a nerd about it for certain.
Very much am a nerd about it. That's why I still use it, and that's why it's still set up for use to this day. That's why for my next camera, I'm looking for something that can help me replicate that look.
Okay. Do you own? Because actually, there's another cinematographer that I've interacted with. I was actually on set with him for a proof of concept. His name's Ben McLean. I did a podcast with him, and that dude, he doesn't just have camera equipment. He has lighting equipment. He has a whole gaff truck that he owns.
Yeah. I have the same amount of stuff. Probably not as much in regards to him, but I do have a truck. It's not a gaff truck, but it's definitely a truck.
Yeah. Oh, he owns like a U-Haul truck. And then
really? I didn't know that Ben had one.
Well, it's his truck. I think, I don't remember. I want to say it's not just it's like one of those smaller U-Haul trucks. It's not like one of those bigger ones, but it's still a giant box truck. That all of this stuff is put into it. And when I thought it was rented, and when I told him, I'm like, hey, dude, where'd you rent this stuff from? He's like, it's mine. I'm like, what? What do you have? What tools do you use most when it comes to lighting a particular scene?
With my lighting package, I have a lot, quite honestly, but it's a bit more on the outdated side. I have like 4 to 8, the small 1x1 newer lights.
Oh, the newer lights.
I don't use those anymore. Not after I got the small rig 220.
Okay.
Which is a cob light, so I can manipulate whatever sort of light profile I want. And then I have 2 other lights that are of smaller intensity. and they're both from the brand Zoller, which is from Zcam. They have, in my opinion, they have a much better lighting profile, and they can also recreate much more light output. Whereas most lights out there can do between 3,000 to maybe 10,000 Kelvin. I'm pretty sure the Zoller lights can do from 2,000 to 20,000.
Oh, wow.
It's got a true amber and like a true blue.
What do they use? LED? Is it LED that those lights are used?
All of my lights are LED, including the small rig. I have avoided getting tungsten lights and just regular Edison lights as much as possible, because I like not having that much heat on my sets.
You don't want a hot light to fall down, because I've felt the radiating heat just standing off of one of those lights just 10 feet away. It's insane. It's insane how hot some of those lights can get.
And that's what I learned in film school, is that the tungsten lights, as beautiful that light output is, I'm pretty sure everybody that has done makeup before hates them.
Oh yeah.
Just the amount of sweat that the actor or anybody that is in front of camera that would produce just from that intensity and that heat.
Hmm.
That's why LED is just so much better.
Well, I mean,
Even though it
it's
does,
also like
even though it has
efficient.
to produce heat to create the light, it's so much easier to dissipate.
Right. Yeah. Well, so tell me, there's a lot of different roles, and I'm curious to see why you chose this. There's a lot of different roles in filmmaking. You got directing, you got acting. There's a lot of different ways to be creative and tell a story. Why did you choose cinematography as your field of profession?
When I first started, I wanted to stay as an editor because I realized very early on that I'm very efficient and very quick at what I do in the editing bay, and it's usually pretty accurate to what the director and the producers wanted initially.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to also be the one to create the shots that I was editing because
I see.
I really wanted to be that person that the editor could go, wow, to.
Mm. Do you still edit your stuff?
Yeah, I still edit a lot. I have to for my full-time job at Hothead Burritos, and for my contracting gigs, I have to edit as well.
Okay.
I
Well,
use I use DaVinci Resolve 19. I broke down and got the studio version because I needed all the plugins.
oh yeah, I have DaVinci Resolve because I started using it for color grading because I have
Mhm.
this feature that's been in the works for way too long. But when I got around finally to start color grading, it was really, I didn't realize why it was so praised for color grading until I started using it. And the node-based system is
Mhm.
way more efficient, and because it's a lot easier, especially if you think, if your brain can process things like in terms of how they're layered, and the steps and the orders. And when you use a node-based system, it's way more efficient
Yep.
than just like a linear software like Adobe Premiere or something like that.
Yeah, where instead of it being layered based, which you'd have to figure out which layer is affecting which layer, and if it's in the correct chronological hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with nodes, there's lines that point to where each node is affecting each node. And
Mm-hmm.
back to what you were saying about DaVinci Resolve with color grading, Resolve was already a color grading software. They just added video editing into it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I thought it was just an editing software that they specialized in the color grading.
Nope. It was a color grading software before it became an editor. It was already the industry standard color grading software. And they just decided, hey, let's beat Final Cut and let's beat Premiere.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, they already have, because one, you already have the industry standard color grading software. And now with Resolve 19, you have their audio DAW integrated into Resolve, and you also have their visual effects software integrated into Resolve as well.
Okay.
So everything that you need is already there,
Right. Right. Yeah.
and it doesn't crash as much.
That I did notice. I can't. I mean, my computer is a dinosaur, and I
Mm.
cannot open up Premiere to save my life. Thank goodness I don't need it anymore. But it runs DaVinci just fine. It's great. I don't know what's going into the back end of the programming, but for some reason I can no longer operate Premiere, but I can work DaVinci Resolve. It's just weird. It's freaking weird.
Do you want to know the reason why?
Oh, please tell me.
From my research, Premiere and Final Cut are more processor heavy when it comes to the edits. So they rely on your hardware a lot more than Resolve does. DaVinci Resolve relies more on your graphics card when it's editing.
I see.
So the video RAM that's in your graphics card is already faster than the RAM that's in your computer. And it's also
Mm,
going to be faster than the processor that is in your computer already. When you get to transcoding and exporting, that's when the processors start to kick in.
I see. Okay. That makes sense.
It's much easier, and and that's the reason why it doesn't crash as much.
Okay. Well, it actually kind of makes sense because it was started off as a color grading software. It was more,
Mhm.
graphics heavy. So but that actually makes a lot of sense now that you say that.
And I don't know if you noticed this either. You don't need to render in Resolve.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. You
That was
just
the thing that
export it.
sold me on Resolve. You don't need to render unless you need to.
Right, right. All right. I want to go. I want to go ahead and pivot to some more your on-set experiences when it comes to dealing with crew and some of the creative dynamics. Because when you first got in, everyone has those projects where it's like, I don't know if I should have done that one. Okay, note this was a red flag. I'm going to look out for this later on. What were your early red flags when it came to interpersonal relationships as a cue of whether or not this project was going to end up looking good and being worth your time?
You know how when you're in the corporate world, it's you don't leave because of your coworkers, you leave because of the manager.
Yeah. I think I know
It's
where you're going with this.
that analogy is very much true when it comes to film sets because it's mostly like egos that give you the biggest red flag. Like if a director is like, it's my way or the highway, you do this or you're offset, and you go, okay, cool, check that off.
Mhm.
It's very much like that because I've realized that everybody that has an ego that's not in check, they question why nobody wants to work with them because they think of themselves as the next thing best to God.
The greatest thing since sliced bread.
Exactly. And you can never be Betty White.
Right, right. Have you had
So it's
projects that
it's
you
always it's
ended
always
up
that
regretting
one
doing?
thing that's very interesting because when you have somebody that has their personality in check and is very much production uh forward to get it done and get the shots you need to get done because time is money.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas trying to not stroke their ego, it's a much smoother running set and a much more laid back production.
Would you say that's the biggest problem in the indie world is ego in the wrong places?
I would tend to agree with that.
Okay. Have you when you do you have any like experiences when it came to having to put your foot down with a director, curiously? Or did you just let it go, finish production, and then not work with them again?
It's usually like the three strike rule for me because being a DP, you are the one that is responsible for bringing the director's creation to life for the script.
Sure.
And there there are always going to be productions where there are multiple discussions and conversations about how a scene is supposed to be shot. And in my opinion, if there is a shot that is literally impossible with the equipment that you have and with the amount of manpower that you have on set,
Mm-hmm.
and let's just say it is deemed dangerous.
Do you have
Like
that sounds like very
someone,
specific. That's very specific. Is that coming from a memory or an experience?
no,
No.
this is
Okay.
just a hypothetical in my opinion.
Okay. Gotcha.
And it's considered dangerous, and the director goes, I don't care, do it. That's
Mm.
when you start to go, no, we're not doing it, we're finding another way.
Do you think?
In this line of work, being that we are all creatives, there's no such thing as saying no because there's always going to be an alternative. There's always going to be a workaround to get what you need to bring that right emotional response from the audience when they're watching it for themselves.
Okay.
And if it's that way or no other way, then I'm sorry, then we can't work together because there's always alternatives that you can do.
And from your experience, which have you found more interpersonal relationship issues when it came to accomplishing the vision? Is it more producers that have larger egos, or is it more directors?
Now, which side do I want to piss off the most?
The one that deserves it.
Oh God.
Or is it kind of 50-50, a bit of both?
It's usually a 50-50 because from my perspective, egos are developed when nobody is around to keep you in check.
Mm. And it's hard to keep the top of the chain in command in check because they're at the top. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when you have somebody that is on such a high praise level and they're telling you to do things that you don't want to do, and they're like, well, why aren't you doing this? It's me you're talking to.
Right. Yeah.
That's when you gotta put the foot down. And not a lot of people do that, and it's why there are a lot of issues that I see on some sets. None of my sets have really been like that, because whenever has been an issue that arises, we talk about it.
Okay. Like a team meeting, group huddle, group
Team
therapy,
meeting,
group
group
hug.
huddle, one-on-one. I still remember the first time I ever had an issue with somebody, and I was the problem.
Oh, you were the problem?
Yep. This was one of the first horror shorts that I did, and I was specifically requested for this short project because of how I shoot things. And I came into that set thinking very much like how I was saying that I was the best thing next to God. And my first AD was talking about me to other people, going, this dude is I don't think I will work with this guy ever again. And the next day, she pulled me aside and told me her issues with me. And she told me that if I don't cool down, then I won't work with you ever again. And I went, okay, because that was the first time I've ever been ego checked before.
Do you think that was justified?
It was very justified.
Okay.
Trust me, it was very justified, because that was my own way of looking into myself and going, wow, I really was a jackass.
Was that early on, and then that was a lesson that you had to learn from?
It was very early on, and I still work with her to this day.
Oh, okay. Well,
we went from enemies to really good friends.
Not quite enemies to lovers, but like enemies to coworkers.
No, not quite that, but we still work with each other to this day, and our relationship is quite strong, both in our personal friendships and as well on sets too.
Okay. What's the project that you're most proud of that you would point to as an example of your work?
It's always going to be, for the time being, Demons Within, because that was some of my best work to date, and especially with the fact that I was able to use the Steadicam / Trinity that I built myself, and was able to create that entire Steadicam shot for both Exorcist scenes. If you haven't watched it, it's on Tubi, it's on Amazon Prime. I highly recommend you guys check it out. But that was the real moment when I went, I'm really good at what I do.
Is there a particular scene or a lighting setup that you felt more very, very proud of?
It was actually the Exorcist scenes, both of them. We shot them both in the same day because we had Andre Gower and Ryan Lambert, the guys from Monster Squad. They were both on set at the same time, and I believe that was their last day. So we had to get those scenes done no matter what. So we scheduled out the Exorcist scenes to be an entire half day, because those are some highly emotional scenes. So we needed to give the actors time to get into character and also get out of character.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was also very needed for me too, because I was in my Steadicam rig for that entire time for the Exorcist scenes. So you can imagine having 20 something pounds going down your back. and I still remember some of the BTS photos and videos. I was laying on my back, like just trying to roll out some of the kinks and pulled muscles that occurred when I was getting shot.
That was the rig that you made?
Yep.
Okay, and it was just really heavy. What was it? Why did it cause like physical pain? Describe to me the setup that caused you to need to be hospitalized.
Oh, I wasn't hospitalized. I was just cooling down. It because it's a DIY Steadicam build.
Mm-hmm.
Most Steadicams are fixed to a certain point where you aren't supposed to feel anything. And because mine was a hodgepodge of stuff, and the vest wasn't really catered to my body, instead of it going throughout my entire body, dispersing the weight,
Mm-hmm.
it just went straight down to my lower back.
Oh,
it was my own doing. I own up to it, and I'm still happy with how the shots turned out.
Okay. What makes a project right for you to come on?
Anything that gets me paid. No.
I mean, that would not be an unfair answer, to be perfectly fair. I mean, man's got to eat.
I mean, man's got to eat, man's got to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's got to be a really, really good story. Something that not only the cast members can get emotionally behind, but also the crew. Because if your crew gets invested into the story and into the project, full circle, it's going to be a much better product once you're in distribution.
Okay. When it comes to not distribution, but things on sets that you've learned from, why would you turn down a project? Conversely,
if the reason why I would turn down projects is if it's not being fully described to me, if the person that I'm in contact with is being very iffy with the details, keeps on pushing things back, or they aren't being very specific with what they're trying to accomplish, that's when I start to raising up my guard and going, am I about to be scammed, or are you just saying this stuff to try and get me on board because of my name?
Okay. Do you think in the local scene that your name's been abused before?
No.
Other than the one time with your one friend who's a really good friend now.
I feel good about the Cincinnati and the tri-state film groups. I feel very good about the people that I've come to very much respect and love in my industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the recent past, I've met a number of people just because I've been getting more interconnected. Just I guess a little bit of backstory is that I was for the past number of years until maybe a year and a half ago, I was a little more isolated because I had a project that had just been on my plate for a while and I'm trying to finish it. So I was working on my craft of writing because you can write by yourself, believe it or not. You don't need people. It's great. You can daydream all day long and feel like you're doing something. It's beautiful.
I mean, that's the same thing in the editing bay. Why
Yeah.
is no work getting done? I don't know. I'm fighting with Batman in Gotham.
God, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, I've been getting more interconnected with people. I've met lots of different people. And one of the reasons also I started the podcast is because it's a great way to just get to know people. And one of the things that's always stuck out to me is let's see. One person said, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is what can make the indie scene locally a lot better? For those who aren't from the area, we're talking about the tri-state Ohio area between Cincinnati and Columbus.
Okay.
And I've met a number of people that weren't outside of here, but some people are kind of now watching because that aren't from here. So, what's something that you think would improve the indie scene, or like what's a critique that you have on the indie scene that you think could be removed that would make it better locally?
Yeah, because I have pondered this question quite a bit, and the answer that I come to more often than not is to get the actual city involved.
Oh, more politically speaking, like from
Not
the
much, not much politically, more
or like
as
from a government
just
perspective.
just from a government perspective to get some creative funds into the independent arts, because most of the productions that come here that bring economy into the cities, they're the big budget production companies.
Mm.
And most of the reasons why they're coming to Cincinnati is, and even Columbus too, twofold reasons. The Columbus and the Cincinnati skylines are very different than any other skyline that is in any major motion picture, because they usually either go to LA, sorry about the fires, they go to New York, or they go down to Florida.
Oh, like
Because
Orlando?
yeah,
Okay.
and they also go to Chicago as well, because those skylines and those cities are already intertwined with the movie making machines, that it's just easier. And the other thing is the tax incentives, just the state tax incentives.
Right.
The reason why independent productions, in my opinion, don't go off the ground, or they don't elevate to a higher level. Oh wow, the sun. Let me move.
You're about to start cooking.
Right. Is because there's not that much incentive for them to go to the next level, because the tax incentives start at a very high number for independent productions. Because let's say you have $100,000 to go to a production, which for independent movies is going to be awesome, right?
Right, right.
But that's not even close to the tax brackets. I think the tax brackets started at maybe $500,000.
Oh, you mean for the tax credits? Like it
Yeah,
has
for
to be
the
a
tax
minimum of
credit.
half
Yeah.
million?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could be very wrong with that statement, but I do believe that if there were more incentives for the lower productions, we could go much, much further in the independent world.
Well, one of the things that I think is not crippling, but holding the independent world back is there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and so because there's a lot of different people in the indie world that they're wanting to get more notice, they want to get their work out there. There's also conversely a lot of noise, and so it's it, the thing that larger production houses have going for them is that they have a concise brand, they have an image, and so that there's a clear marketing message for that. But with indie world, there's a lot of foot soldiers. There's a lot of different visions, and sometimes those visions can kind of blend and blur into sort of this giant cauldron of creativity in the local scene. And so sometimes it's difficult to try to market that because it's there's sometimes there's too much nuance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can agree to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that because there's so much that happens in the independent world. Yeah, too many cooks in the kitchen. Yeah, that's a good way to put about it.
Well, I mean, it's a double-edged sword though, because it's great to have that many people that you can collaborate with potentially, and exercise that that creative muscle. It's also it's difficult to market, and one of the I can't figure out, because I've thought about it a lot too, like how could the business paradigm shift? And I can't think of a good solution. It bothers me because like we want that solution to be able to elevate the attention that the indie scene gets, because often the indie scene is made for people who like indie things, but most of the people that they watch Netflix, they watch things that larger production houses do, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's an unsolved problem that, not I haven't heard a good solution to yet. So I always like to ask that question, from people I'm talking to.
And it also to keep this conversation going too, to get noticed by those bigger productions. Like let's say you want to get noticed by Netflix to get on their platform, or Amazon Prime to get on their platform, and not only to get to those platforms, but to have them buy you out and also to get royalties too. Because that's also in that equation too.
Well, to like build a company, and then, because now you're starting to compete with their business, basically they just buy you out, and then,
Yep.
the cycle of capitalism just kind of reintegrates itself vertically. Yeah.
Because even with that conversation, there's still the double-edged sword too, because you're already at that higher level. Now you got to fight with the unions.
Yeah, I mean, unions are the biggest double-edged sword. It's like, it's a great idea. Also, the union sometimes it looks like the union needs a union for the union. It's it's like, when a union gets so big, it becomes a whole nother company that sometimes you have to fight with, and it feels like, well, that's not the point of a union conceptually. It's like the thing with I recently had a conversation with somebody whose father served one term, like 20 years ago, or so, 20 or 30 years ago, as I think it was either as the president of the Screenwriters Guild or the Actors Guild. I forget, but it was one term. I forget how long one term is. And he said, even back in the day, the politics were insane. It was awful.
It's just weird to even think that there's. Okay. Oh, that just hurts my brain. Oh my god. You can't avoid it.
It's sort of inevitable at a certain point, and
Yeah.
then it's the death and rebirth of, ideas and structures and organizations, and they bubble up, they break, they boil, and that's kind of just life, and there's no permanent fix to things that just happen as a result of nature.
And here's another one too. Let's say you have a production that is ready to go on the set, right? And then you have an investor that wants to bring in more money, and it's enough money where you have to go with the unions, where you have to go with SAG, or you have to go
That's
with,
true. Yeah, that is
with the crew
true.
unions. And that actually happened to me. Like we had an investor for one of my projects that would have brought us up to that point that we would have had to, as myself as a DP, I would have had to step down as a DP and just move to a producer role.
Wait, why? What was the context of this?
Because when you get to a certain money level, you have to go with the unions.
Oh, in order to be approached by the producer for it? I see.
When you had to be approached to that, and I believe that's also with the tax credits too. Honestly, if I'm completely incorrect in this statement, we can strike this whole thing from the podcast.
Okay, this is
is
a
all
podcast.
conjecture at this point, because it did happen to my production, but we still went through it because there was one particular actor in the movie that did not want us to go SAG. And so we decided to not go SAG. We still went independent.
Was that specifically for business purposes, or was there another reason involved?
It was for us. We just wanted to make the damn movie.
Right.
We got tired of waiting. That's my story about it, at least.
Okay.
Because for the director of the movie, it was years and years in the making. Like crews came and went, and then when they approached myself, I went, let's go.
Yeah, let's go make a movie. Let's be creative. Thanks for paying me. Cool.
Because the director was a really good friend of mine and knew that I would not beat around the bush. I would go in and get stuff done, and we did. Now, it was out of our own dime now, but we still made something that everybody can be proud of.
Okay. What movie was that?
I'm not at liberty right now to talk about it.
Oh, okay. Is it something that hasn't been released yet?
It has not been released yet.
Okay. Is there any material on it, or is it like on IMDb or something like that, or is it
There is an
under the?
IMDb for it, but you'll have to go searching.
Okay, all right. It's It sounds suspicious, man. It sounds suspicious. I don't know. It's like a here's my secret film. Come to the come to the premiere
If you
wearing
want
dark
to take a
robes.
look at it, if you want to take a look at it, you can strike this from the podcast. It's called.
Okay. What's the reason for the oh gosh what's the reason for not being able to talk about it?
Because we're still in the editing process, we're still in post production, and we're still trying to
Okay.
make the movie possible.
I see. So it's an ongoing process, and you don't want to
Yep.
injure the.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can strike that if you want me to. I'll just put.
I would prefer that. Yeah.
All right, I can respect that. I'll just cut to some you know a mariachi band or something like that.
But I will say this for that movie, I was able to recreate a shot that I've always wanted to recreate.
What movie did you recreate it?
It was actually something that I thought of right on the spot. So you know how a lot of one takers go, where if you want to continue that one take into another one take, you got to have some sort of transition, whether that be with motion blur, or you got to move into like a wall or something to keep
Multiple
it
shots for
going.
a one take shot.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
This particular one, and this was, I edited this up to show to the director, and I really don't mind talking about it because this is a damn proud moment of mine.
All right.
Because he was worried about the transition from one of the villains in the movie throwing a knife at him, and
Okay.
his character was supposed to catch it midair as it was being thrown.
All right.
So very much Mr. Miyagi sort of thing with the fly, but it's with the blade.
Okay. And how did you technically accomplish that? Is that more editing or shooting involved with
No,
that?
it was shooting. It was all
Okay.
practical. There was no cross dissolve involved at all in the post production process. There's no smoothing out either.
I'll have to see that then. That sounds really cool.
Because what it was is, let's say I'm throwing a knife at you from screen left to screen right.
Mm-hmm.
I follow very quickly with my camera to create that motion blur, which you can still get the motion blur even though you're at a higher shutter speed, as long as
Right.
you're moving fast enough. And
Okay.
then you can do that same effect with the catch, because the knife at that point is already in the hand. You're
I
just
see.
recreating the same amount of motion blur to where that hand is to catch it.
Okay.
And then the scene continues.
I'm sort of piecing it together in my head. I see conceptually how it happened.
So
And
think about it this way. Let me get the camera out.
you're gonna catch the knife too.
Yeah, I will catch it.
Okay.
So think about it this way. I'm moving this way
Yeah.
to recreate the movement to the person.
All right.
And then I do this same movement, but in that movement, that's where the main character is and the blade catching occurs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. I see what you pieced
And
together
then
then.
midway through those shots is when the cut occurs
Right.
from the knife throw to the
Right
knife
in the middle
catch.
of the whip pan is what you're talking about.
Yep, in the middle of the whip pan. Yep.
Well, I hope it works out. Is that a feature then?
It will be a feature, yes.
It will be a feature. Okay. All right.
We shot so much.
Well, Jake, it's been great getting to know you. I appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking a little bit about yourself and your thoughts on the indie scene. Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave with the audience?
Never stop
Any
creating.
tea that you want to spill? Any tea you want to spill? Any? Because I'll take the views. I'll take the views. It's fine.
OJ did nothing wrong. No. No, that needs to be censored the entire time.
I thought it was pretty funny. Oh.
the best piece of advice that I can give to anybody is to never stop creating, even if you may think it is the dumbest idea in the world. It's still something that you should create because it could turn out to be the next cult classic. I mean, look at The Room.
Mm-hmm. That's true. But The Room is a notoriously good bad movie.
There was a post that I saw on Facebook that asked the question, who would be the dumbest person to play James Bond? And my immediate thought was Tommy Wiseau.
I would watch that movie personally.
I know.
I would have to see what would happen.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. What is the next project that I'm gonna censor the thing that that you're gonna have released next that people can look forward to, or how can people find you and your work?
You can find me on Instagram. I am Jake2. That is TOO, not a number 2. And I am also on Facebook. You can just find my personal account, Jake Reynolds. And I also have a like page on Facebook called ReelCinnemonProducts, and it is spelled very weird. So I highly recommend just finding my personal account and just going to ReelCinnemonProducts from there.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, man. Have a good one. Best of luck with creativity. And if there's any other horror stories that you have that you didn't want to say, feel free to text it to me because I like some good juice, like some good tea.
What kind of tea do you prefer? Do you prefer like some really hot tea or more like the really cool tea?
Something spicy. I like spicy tea.
Oh, you know, like spicy.
I like spicy tea. You know.
Ooh.
Like I want the ginger in there. You know, the nice.
That's the worst kind of tea to spill because that ruins friendships.